Let's move over to Rome Odunze. We're we're
Some
dropping a
people would
tier.
have him either in the tier with these other two guys, or they would have him like side by side with Neighbors. Some
Yeah,
people would.
I think there's a slight dip. And it's not
I do too.
necessarily to say that Odunze is not super talented or that he's not going to be great at the next level. But I do think that Rome Odunze, at least in college, had a bit of a superpower that I don't think any of the other guys had. And just hear me out, because when I say this, you're going to be like, that doesn't make any sense. Just hear me out. Michael Penix, I think, elevated his wide receivers more than the other quarterbacks. You know, Jane Daniels was awesome, had an amazing season, won the Heisman. But I think Penix, with his ability to throw on time and on target and throw with leverage down the field, made his receiver's job that much easier. So obviously, you've got Rome Odunze, you've got Jalen
A
McMillan,
little
you've
bit
got
like
Jalen
what
Hyatt.
Tua does with Tyreek and Waddle. Not that we
Yeah,
knew
but
Tyreek was obviously incredible, but like he's been better since he's being with Miami just because of that style of QB. Now, I don't think Tua's an amazing quarterback, but like you were just saying with Penix, I don't think Penix is a great quarterback.
Yes, but Penix throws a significantly better deep ball than Tua does. At least he throws it better outside the hashes with accuracy. Um, to the point where it's like jump ball situations for Rome Odunze. Obviously, he is. That's the thing people say about him. He's a jump ball freak, and he is. But also, I think that there is an element here where Michael Penix threw passes that were maybe a little bit easier to catch for his receivers than even what Jaden Daniels threw to his receivers, or even what Quinn Ewers, or, you know, fill in the blank, obviously Kyle McCord. He put his receivers in a position to win, and Rome Odunze especially capitalized on those situations. And so here he is, a 1,500-yard season later. That is not necessarily a knock. I think it's just something you got to take into account when you're looking back at Rome Odunze. I do think Michael Penix factors in there where it's like, okay, yes, Odunze's great, but also he did benefit from a quarterback that helped maximize everything around him.
That's fair. I will give you that. And I mean, I do feel like that's sort of reflected here. Some is he is a tier below the top two guys. There's a reason for that. He's a little bit. I think he stayed. He's still 21, but I want to say he stayed 4 years
He did.
At Washington. So still broke out. I think year as a junior. I think is when he broke out. That's when he had his first 1,000-yard season, and then last year, obviously the huge monster year. If you watch him though, I mean, as good as Michael Penix was in that offense, like Rome is he's still a dog. Like
he's filthy.
he's got a little bit of Devontae in him. As blasphemous as that sound, like he's got some Devontae Adams in him.
Yep.
You know, 4.47, 40-inch vert. I mean, all around great athletic stats. I'm not too worried about Rome Odunze. Like, and maybe there's a chance come draft day he's higher up on my board. Like, I mean, you know, some people want to predict he goes higher than Malik Neighbors, and if he gets an amazing landing spot and Neighbors, you know, God forbid, ends up with the Jets or the Bears, like some people think he could. Not that either of those spots would be bad, but you know, if he's with the Jets or Bears, and then Odunze is on the Chargers, or the Cardinals trade back and get him somehow, something like that, I guess I can see the argument. But just the prospect of, you know, how young and how early Neighbors broke out, and obviously we know about Harrison. There's a reason he's a step behind in our rankings, just as a player behind the other two. Now, you know, draft capital and all that will dictate other things.
Yeah, and I mean, he still had 1,100 yards in 2022, so it's not like he's a one-year wonder. He's definitely been producing for a long time. I do think there's context to why he's a 4-year player, though. He came in And there was the COVID year, which affected everything, obviously. And so
you got to give him a pass on that.
Yeah, he's a 3-year player. I have seen some people knock him being a 4-year player because it is a fair criticism, generally speaking, guys that stay in school longer, that are 4-year and 5-year players, when they produce later in their career, when they don't break out until their 3rd year, 4th year in college, it is a little bit of a red flag, generally speaking. But I think with Rome Odunze, there needs to be some additional context there. And I think that's spread throughout this class.
He's not much older than
he's
Harrison,
20.
I think but a few months.
Yeah, he's 21 years old. It's not like he's 24, 25 years old. I mean, we'll talk about Xavier Leggett later. He's 24 years old. So
Xavier Leggett's about as old as
we are. It's a little bit different. He dang near is. Dude is 2 steps away from having a family and a house and a mortgage. So yeah. he's almost there. But yeah, any thoughts on Odunze before we move on? I think you mentioned Devontae Adams as a comp. I don't think that's crazy. I definitely have thought.
I'm not saying he's going to be Devontae, but the style of play and his ability to track the ball is similar.
Yes. It's so funny because his calling card is his contested catch ability, but I think that sort of sells him short. When you watch him play, it's not just that he goes and mosses people. Yes, he does that. And that I think is a nice trait to have. He's so smooth, dude. I think he is overlooked as a route runner a little bit.
Yeah. Absolutely. I guess that's sort of where I had the Devontae comp for him, was not just the style of plays, because he ran a 4.47, which is good, but the speed doesn't necessarily flash, that way, but he just knows how to manipulate people with his route running and just create that little bit of separation, be it at the line of scrimmage or down the field at the top end of the route, like Devontae can, to where, you were kind of with him the whole time, and all of a sudden there's a little bit of separation there out of nowhere.
Yeah, no, he can sort of flip his hips and manipulate his body a little bit in a way that's just, it's very skillful, the way that he can move his body through space. And yeah, so he's a slight tier down from the top 2 guys, but that's not to say he's not a perennial top 12 fantasy receiver in the making. Like, dude is.
No, I'm very excited for Rome Odunze.
I am not sure that he would not have been the wide receiver 1 in last year's class. Like, if you had what we know about him today, if he came out last year, if you just bumped everything back a year and he had his 2023 season in 2022, came out last year, and we were judging him against Jackson Smith-Njigba, against Jordan Addison, I think it's very possible that Rome Odunze would have been the wide receiver 1 of last year's class.
I think there's a chance we might have put JSN over him, just because people want to talk bad about JSN last year, but when the dude had 1,600 yards as a true sophomore at Ohio State with Garrett Wilson then playing, there's a reason we had him that high. But I agree, Rome probably would have been even with him in worst case scenario. You're flipping a coin between the two.